interrupt this message for a very important broadcast. Welcome to the Distillery on PodX.
I'm going to be honest with you, that smells like pure gasoline.
What up, friends? How's it going? It's your boy Tomahawk back again for yet another episode of the Distillery. I'm really excited for today because I've got some history with this young man who has an incredible story when it comes to where he came from and the profession he chose and how he managed to do it going forward. Parker Thompson is a guy that started right here in Central Alberta and has now moved on to be one of the premier racers that has probably ever come out of the province. I'm fairly certain. I can't think of anybody else that's doing what he does. I'm really excited. Here you go. Ladies and gentlemen, Parker Thompson, thank you so much for joining me, buddy.
Oh, Tony, anytime. Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. Now, Parker, we first met when Locke and I were doing the morning show on Z98.9, and you were just young and you were starting out, and you had brought us a distracted driving initiative. Now, at that time, I had no idea who the hell you were, and the email came down. I'm like, wait, we have somebody that actually races kind of semi-professionally out of Central Alberta? That doesn't happen, right? Can you think of anybody else that's come out of Central Alberta that does what you do when it comes to cars and racing and this sort of thing?
No. Well, first I want to touch on this because I think it's important. But for those of you who know Tony's background being with Z98, and then back then it was, oh my gosh.
Z99, it would have been, yeah.
Yeah, Z99, 98.9. And then it was KG Country, I believe, back then. Was that the correct? Because I know it's changed.
Our sister station was KG Country, has now moved on to Real Country for those that are in the area. Yeah.
Perfect. So kind of cool because Tony and Locke were the first guys that actually got me on radio, which is kind of it's wild to think about in my media and my broadcast career because, you know, you guys were a huge part to me falling in love with being on the other side of the mic. So thank you very much.
Thanks. I appreciate that, man. He would love to hear that.
And so that's a cool little tidbit to show our history. And then, yes, when we're talking about race car drivers in Alberta, you know, I have a history book, actually. I got it from somebody from the Rotary Club in Red Deer, where it gives kind of the history of Alberta and racing. There's, I believe, 2 people from Alberta as citizens have competed in the Indy 500. But I would say in the last 25 years, I'm probably the only real notable race car driver that's hailed from the province. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Oh, dude, it's an interesting story because one of the places you frequented was somewhere that I loved too. Now, at the north end of Red Deer, Alberta, on 11A is a small go-kart, or was a small go-kart track, and I loved it. It was fun to zing around and pretend, you know, you were a professional driver and stuff. But really, it's not too far from where you started as were you a kid at the time? Like maybe, 11 or something like that, zinging around? Is that what sparked your interest?
7.
7 years old.
Yeah. So the story goes, so my dad, his name's Doug, he raced dirt bikes. He raced road bikes. So like your MotoGP bikes for Canada. And he actually got to a point right where he was making a paycheck from racing, which is a really tough thing to do. It doesn't matter what you're racing. If you can make a paycheck doing what you love, that's the pinnacle.
Right.
And then he actually started racing jet boats. So he had raced everything. The joke is he raced everything but 4 wheels. And when I was 5 years old, I got a dirt bike, a Yamaha PW50 used dirt bike. I remember it like it was yesterday. And I had the bike for 2 weeks before my mom said, "You're selling that. We're not getting our kid into racing. We're not." My dad's got some metal in him. Obviously, he's had a few accidents. You have to. If you want to go fast, you've got to push the limits. And she did not want that for her son. She saw what her husband went through, and she's like, "I don't want that for my son." So we sold her on a go-kart when I was 8. We said, "Hey, 4 wheels, it's double the amount. It's safer than 2.
Right.
And
no,
we
that makes
got her
sense.
on board with a go-kart. So yeah, I started there when I was 7 on the north end of Red Deer. Do you remember the name of the place? I can't remember.
I think it was just Red Deer Raceway. I can envision the sign, but I can't remember the words. And it was, for those that don't know, it was an interesting track because it basically had, and I'm going to draw with my finger. So it went around like this. It came back. It went over and an overpass, and then under and back around. And it was such a thrill to whip over that thing as hard as you could, crank on the wheel, and then zing under it. And it's such a thrill, whether or not you're a professional racer. Like, just that going fast was fun. So that must have been like the little seed in you now with, the dirt bike and stuff like that, but then zinging around on a go-kart. That's where you started. Kart racing, for those that don't know, is a thing. And there is a professional series in a circuit, right?
Yeah. And there's guys getting paid to kart race.
What?
Oh,
Go-karts?
Yeah. Yes.
That's
and I can
awesome.
say, so, you fast forward my career from age 8 when I started to age 13.
Wow.
I moved to Italy for karting. And it was, I have to say, like, the team I was racing on had 2 full semis. Like, it was almost, to a certain degree, just as, if not more professional than the racing I'm doing right now, modern day professional racing.
Now hold the phone, Park. We're not talking about the race carts you get at the West End Mall or something like that. Like, these are high end, like, tuned machines, right?
Yes. And to that point, actually, and because it's cheaper to make a go-kart than it is to obviously develop a race car. Like, every track we went to, we had a specific kart developed for that track. So a certain softness, different metals, different geometry in the kart. Like, it was to another level. It's the Formula One of that. I have to say, and I've said this to a lot of people close to me, that's probably the closest I'll ever come to a Formula One-esque, right? Where they're tuning their cars. They custom build chassis for every track they go to. Same type of deal. Yeah.
You said like custom metals, like that, like, as a former welder, I'm thinking to myself, okay, what are you talking about? The flex in the metal? Like, you're literally rebuilding the cart specifically for that track.
And hundreds, Tony. We're talking like when we would go test karts, it would be like you would test, 30 or 40 different go-karts in a day. That was part of my job when I was there, was you go to the racetrack and you're just testing every different design. So one thing, and you nailed it, which is the softness of it. Go-kart doesn't have suspension, right? It's just a chassis connected to the spindles and the axle.
Okay, I never thought of that. Okay, that makes sense.
There's no suspension. There's no spring. There's nothing, dampening the wheel rate when it hits a bump or does anything on a track. So the go-kart, the metal is the suspension, and how soft or stiff or the design of that is your suspension. So the kart chassis is actually the main component there that's very important. Whereas when I race cars now, because they have shocks, dampers, that's the most important part, right? That's what's taking the load in the tires.
So it's not so much the horsepower in the engine. Really, it's about how your car reacts to that G-force in a turn or something like that?
100%. There's 2 ways to go
Holy
about
shit,
it, right?
I sound like I know what I'm talking about.
You do. You just unlocked you could be an engineer. So there's 2 ways to look at racing, right? You've got Enzo Ferrari, which is, for those of you who know what a Ferrari is, a racer through and through. He started Ferrari, which is one of the most successful Formula One teams, et cetera, et cetera. But his motto was, and you'll see it, it's one of his most famous quotes, which is, aerodynamics is for people who don't know how to build engines, which is essentially his way of saying that the engine is the most important part to a race car, which I'm not going to disagree with, because trust me, I've had bad engines, and an engine is very important. That is what is thrusting
I would imagine, yeah.
Thrusting you forward. But you're never going to win a race if you don't have the full package, and half that package is the chassis.
Right. And here's the thing. Oh, Parker, I didn't lose it. Okay, so I want to go back to the kart, because I remember in Stettler, Alberta, they had set up a track, and it was higher end karts that were racing on this thing, but it was kind of like a traveling tour of racers. And it was one of those things where they went through Main Street and they put bales on the corners and all that sort of stuff. Did you start with something like that, like a traveling track? Or when you talk about going to Italy, are we talking about like it's asphalted as a permanent track?
So, long-winded, but I'd say the short answer to this is I started at what was called CKRC, which is Calgary Kart Race Club, which is still around. They don't race at the same track I raced at. For anybody in the Calgary area, there used to be a track called Race City, which is down by the local dump, actually.
Classy.
Yeah, right. And that's ultimately what actually took the track was the dump extended their land as Calgary built out of the city. They absorbed the racetrack. But Race City was very famous for bikes and racers. It had a drag strip. It had a go-kart track. That's where I got my start, permanent racetrack. Go-karts, just like in IndyCar when we race on the streets, right? Like the streets of St. Petersburg, the streets of Toronto. Go-karting does the same thing. They'll race on their permanent race courses or road courses, but they'll also branch out to the city streets and do city races to kind of get fans immersed in it. So the Supernats, we raced at the Rio Hotel, which is one of the most famous go-kart races in the world. It's called the Supernats, SCUSA Supernats. And they race at a hotel parking lot in Las Vegas, which is all the teams at the end of the year go to Las Vegas. It's a huge deal. All the factory teams, there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars being spent to win that race. Very important race.
Quick question, yep. Parker. So is it one of those things where it's like a qualification, like you need to go through certain other races to qualify for this giant end race, or how does that work? How do you get into that?
Yeah, I mean, like anything, racing for those of you who don't know what racing is, it's two combined things together. It's a sport and a business at the same time. And that's what a lot of people don't understand is there's the sport aspect, which is you have to be good to compete. And there's a license you need, right? You can't just walk off the street and go race in any race you want to. But the second
Give me your car. Let me take it for a rip, Parker. I'll be nice with her. I promise.
The second aspect of it is it's one of the most expensive sports in the world. So somebody's got to pay for it. And that's usually in the form of sponsor. It's in the form of, it can be anything, family money, a friend of a friend. At the end of the day, if you're going to buy tires, buy fuel to go fast, you've got to have a way to pay for it. So when you say, how do you get into it, or how does one show up to those races? It's a combination. You need your licenses, you need your stuff, and then you need to find a way to pay for it. But you need to be good enough. I mean, in Europe and in the big races that I raced in go-karting, there was 120, 130 entries, right? Where there's 130 people racing at one race against each other, and only 30 people are going to make the final, which is where they pay, where the trophies pay out. So
do they do heats? Is it a heats thing? Yeah, okay.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. I mean,
wow.
However many competitors.
How many carts on a track at a time for something like that?
30, 40, give or take.
It's busy out there then.
Yeah, super. Yep.
Wow. Okay. So the karting aspect is amazing because, you mentioned a couple of locations, because here in Central Alberta, or for those of you watching in Western Canada, I mean, racing just isn't a thing. We're hockey people and that sort of thing. But when you go to places like you mentioned, Italy, I mean, if you're a race car driver in Italy of any sort, you're basically like that same sort of hockey player persona. Sure. Would that be accurate? You're a celebrity, right? And football,
Well, that was the joke when I was in Italy. It was your morning news was your football team, your local football team, and then what was Ferrari doing? And they would literally, this is how cool it was. Like you'd have your morning coffee, and the news was making for the race. They've got a new front wing, or they've got a new whatever they're doing. Like that was the news, which is cool. I mean, as a 13-year-old kid, I'll be honest. I like to talk. I was always, growing up, I was always popular in school because I got along with everybody, loved to talk.
Come on, man. You were a good-looking kid. You probably did well with the girls, and you were also a professional race driver. I mean, come on, man.
Well, obviously. But here's the point I want to make on that, though, is karting isn't the most popular thing when you're growing up. I mean, when you get in front of your class, you say, hey, I drive go-karts. Yeah, okay, next. Cool. That was not a pickup line when I was a kid. It works a little better now that I'm in my 20s and I can say I get paid to race cars, but it was a lot different back then. So It was cool as a 13-year-old kid to go to Italy and then for go-karting to be popular, right? For me,
Parker, how does that transition happen? So you're racing with a Calgary club. Is it because somebody found like there was a natural talent within you, or did somebody level with you and say, hey man, the only real way that you're going to move forward with this thing is you got to get off the continent? Like how does that transition happen?
Well, it's a lot of stars had to align for me to make that move. And it's kind of funny. there's even a backstory to it. Like my mom did not want me to go to Italy by myself because I moved over there by myself at 13. It wasn't like my family came with me. Yeah, no, I was alone.
Of course, mom's not going to be feeling that.
So yeah, no, mom and dad almost, I mean, they even joke about it now. I'm sure divorce was talked about when Doug said, see you later. We'll see you in a year. Have fun in Italy. And mom
But we do it with hockey team. We do it with hockey players. They go, they move off and they live with, is it the same kind of thing? I'm trying to compare it to something we're familiar with. Is it like a boarding house? Like you have a family that takes care of you? Or
a billet family. Yeah.
Yeah, a billet. That's the word. Yeah.
Originally, when I moved over there, it was, I was supposed to live with the other race car drivers that raced on the team, but they were 4 or 5 years older than me. I was 13. So when the first day I arrived, the secretary of our race team, who happened to have a son and 2 daughters, said to the team owner, she didn't speak any English, which is hilarious. My whole billet family spoke no English. She said that Parker shouldn't stay in that house, that it's probably going to be trouble. Why doesn't he stay with my family? So I lived with an Italian family for 12 months.
Did you learn some of the language?
I did.
Did you learn a little bit?
What's sad, like if you, I can say funny stuff now, but back when I was 13, I was pretty fluent. Like I could get around, I could do whatever I needed to do in Italian. And you lose it so quick. Like if you're not using it daily.
Wow, it didn't stick with you. I thought once you learned something like that at a young age, it would just kind of always be there.
Not at all. Like it. Huh. And I think it's a matter of, if you're ever going to learn a language, I've heard many people say this, that you're not allowed to speak your tongue, right? Like that's an easy way to learn a language is when you're forced to.
Okay.
And that's exactly what happened. I mean, if I wanted to be, I went from being one of the most social 13-year-olds that I knew to now I can't even speak. Like my personality is never going to come through if I can't talk. So it forced you to learn pretty quickly.
What were your demands? Now you were a young, you were a young adult, or not even adult. You were a kid or a teenager at that time. But now you've made a pretty serious commitment in a giant move. What were some of the demands on you? Was it like a daily practice, or like what would your day look like as a kid trying to get ready to race professionally?
Well, the cool thing, cars nowadays, just to give people some insight to it, we don't test much on the track. Like I'm not really in the car a lot. You're lucky to get a test day before you actually go race at a track.
Oh, really? Jeez.
Yes. It's very
so Days of Thunder lied, and you're not in there telling people how you want the car and stuff like that.
No, trust me. There's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes, but it's just your time to do it's very limited. Okay. Go-karting, on the other hand, I was in the cart 6 days a week. Like we tested, the go-kart factory that I lived at was built on a go-kart track. You could go out whenever you wanted to.
That's awesome. So obviously you were out there nonstop, like
pretty much. So when you say what's your day filled with, it was always gym with my teammates. So we went to the gym 5 days a week. A lot of people don't understand this, and I don't want to get into the big discussion, but I have played many sports. I can tell you straight up, racing, like when we have to be in the car for as long as we do, facing the G-forces we have to do and facing all the stuff, not to mention how hot it is, right? You've got 5 layers of stuff on. You've got.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to a friend of mine just on the phone just before we came
being in the
live.
gym as you can.
And that was one of the things I was thinking about it. I used to laugh and joke like race car drivers are athletes. Like, you're sitting in a car, man. But I guess the exertion of a long period of time with that car kind of whipping you around and the core strength that you would require in order to maintain control of a very powerful piece of machinery. I mean, that's no joke. Like you need to, you can't just have a fat guy like me jumping in there and expect him to be able to whip around turns on the regular like that. So the gym, I understand it now a lot more than I guess I respect it more now than I used to. So and you would agree, like, a race car driver, that's an athlete. That's somebody that's finely tuned in their sport, and fitness is a big part of that.
For sure. So it was always gym in Italy, I've maintained that pretty well from when I was 11, 12 years old, started taking racing serious to now. I've been in the gym just about 5 days a week for my entire life.
Well, you look it, man. I've been on the Traeger nonstop. I'm on that Traeger diet, that smoker diet.
That's awesome.
I probably need to come spend a couple of months with you and get it right, get it tight, you know?
Oh, you're good. You're training. Coach Al will get you. He'll get you suited up.
There we
He's a
go.
good guy. So anyway, I train actually with him, which is kind of funny now. So there's a long story there too. He was my first
Al.
Coach Al Parada.
Oh, Uncle Al Parada, dude. The Parada pain train is what we call it.
There we go. Yep. So he was my first
quick, for those that don't know, we should throw him a bump. That's called Cam Pro. It's
Yes,
in
sir.
Red Deer, Alberta. You want to get it right, get it tight, go see Uncle Al Parada, get on the Parada pain train. He's going to get you sorted whenever the hell we can get back in the gym. Sorry,
Yep.
I throw him a shout out.
No, that was perfect. That's why I put it in there too. So you're on the same page. But back to Italy, it was gym, it was karting every day, and it was finishing
School?
up. Yeah, well, grade 7.
How did that
7 or
work,
grade
Parker?
8.
Is that a tutor situation or?
No, I got to give another shout out to Red Deer Catholic School District. So they actually, at the time, they had a school called St. Gabriel's Online Learning, and it ran with their middle school and high school programs. It was kind of originally developed for outreach and then also for the WHL guys, Red Deer Rebels.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, again,
so that they could stay.
There's that parallel. Okay.
Exactly. And then they kind of just tuned it so that I could be in another country on a completely different time clock and take care of my schooling. So I had a great group of teachers that
How the crap do you apply yourself? Listen, man, you're a young teenager. You're overseas. You're probably at this point completely enthralled and focused on this new sport that you're just passionate about. And then you got somebody that's, emailing you from back in Canada telling you need to do this assignment. How the hell do you apply? Did you even graduate, dude?
So it's kind of funny because one of the online learning for a guy that learns by talking and learns by, all I need is a teacher to draw a whiteboard diagram and I can understand just about anything. I think anyone could if they had the right teacher. Right. Trying to learn it online was completely different for me. And I did not do well at it the first year that I tried with it, but I had a great group of teachers the first year that really stuck with me. The other thing too, I was pretty good in school when I left. I was always on honor roll with distinction. Like I took school very serious, but then when I didn't have, a 9 to 3 schedule in school, all of a sudden the procrastination came out. It's like, well, I got racing and I got this and I got that. I can do that, and you keep pushing it. So I was lucky to have some really good teachers that made sure to keep me in check and make sure that I kept getting the work done. And then once I figured it out, it took about a year to figure out how to learn online. One of the best things I ever did because number one, I finished high school early, got it all whacked out.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
How old were you? What, like 16, 17?
Yeah, I graduated a year before what would have been my graduating year.
Who are you, man? Like, who are you? The guy just excels at everything he does. Come on. I failed. I didn't graduate because I failed band class. And if there's one thing I would like to think I'm good at, it's music. But that's the thing that crutched me, man. You just seem to have that sort of mental focus and that application, Parker, that I think you it would be demanded of you to go through what you did and be successful. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but it seems like that's what it's lining up to be. You have to be dedicated and a real student of not only the sport, but adapt to that learning experience. I can't imagine how tough that would have been, man. It's not like you can ask your billet mom for help if she doesn't even speak English. You know what I mean?
Well, and that gets you into another story too. I'm probably telling too many, but my Italian. So I'm an only child. So it was really cool to have siblings. And I still stay in touch with my 3 siblings that I grew up with in Italy for a year, which is cool. Yeah, I had a brother that I stayed with and then 2 sisters in the same family. But my sisters were very good at math. And they taught me, shall we say, that was my year of trigonometry and a bunch of other stuff. And they taught me some, I'm not going to call them cheats, but I'm going to call them different ways to do math that we weren't doing in Canada, way easier. So,
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it was great. They taught me a lot. So there's a cool story there. One of the best, definitely some of the best times of my 23 years so far.
Well, I mean, when you're stuck in a situation like that, and you're living with a family, of course they're gonna be your adopted sort of family, and they're probably gonna remain close, I would imagine, for the rest of your life. But as you moved forward in the sport from that kart side of things, at what point did you decide that's not enough for you and it's time to advance? Like, what's the natural advancement to a bigger vehicle or an actual car rather than a kart?
So great question. There is no draft. It's not like you go from the WHL to
Right.
the NHL. It's a very different process. You still get scouted in a way, but it's at the end of the day, when you're about ready to move to cars, which is 16, 17, 18, right? From karting to cars.
Is that
You're
for you
asking-
or is that in general, like for any racer?
I would say across the board. You
Okay.
definitely got to make the switch about before you're 20.
Okay.
Give or take. But in that age range, it's not like you have a draft year. It's very different. There is no draft process. The best way to describe it is right now it's easier to become an astronaut than it is to become a race car driver. There's 20
Really?
paying seats in IndyCar, right? There's only 20 seats. Think about that. Like a draft year in the NHL, you're drafting hundreds of players.
Yeah.
IndyCar, there's only 20. Right?
I suppose, would it be safe to say, Parker, once you've got a sponsor and you've got a car, you're probably going to be doing that for some time, so that the spaces opening up aren't a regular thing, right?
Nil. So you're lucky that one kid out of your year, your draft year in racing, makes it as a race car driver. One kid.
Wow.
Let alone anything else other than that. It's one of the very difficult. So. My point in telling you that, when you make your switch or when you make the career decision is more kind of the opportunities that are presented and how you break into it, right? It's not every day that a team owner says, yeah, I trust you now to drive a couple $100,000 race car and not crash it. So,
but it's true. Like,
yeah.
Man, listen, when I was teaching my kid how to drive, okay, and he got his learner's license, I've got a great photo on my Facebook where I trained him through the industrial area on a weekend when it wasn't busy, right? So that he could just drive. And if he kind of floated lanes a little bit, it wasn't a big deal. But let me tell you something, dude. The only reason why I let him drive that vehicle in the first place is because it had an e-brake. And my hand was on it the whole time because I was freaking out. That old Jeep Liberty wasn't worth anything close to what one of these amazing machines would be. So I understand you need to be careful about choosing a driver, and maybe you're a little nervous the first couple of times they go in.
Just a little bit. Yeah. So that's where it kind of comes down to, is just the opportunities that get handed to you. So I was lucky enough to break into cars when I was 16 and then stay on the road to Indy for 5 years. And then every race car driver's story and their career path is different, right? There's that's what's cool about motorsports is there's unlike, I guess you could kind of compare it. A lot of the people back in Canada that are probably listening to this podcast know hockey pretty well. So you've got the NHL. You can maybe get paid in the AHL, or like the farm teams wouldn't be anywhere near as high in the NHL, but you could be on a 2-way contract and, float
bounce
in and
back
out of
and
that.
forth or something. Yeah.
But it's not, I wouldn't say that's a prosperous career in terms of you can only be on that. Those are kind of the guys waiting in the wings to go to the NHL. And if you don't go to the NHL, your career spans 5 to 10 years, maybe.
Yeah.
That for 5 to 10 years. Racing's way different. There's IndyCar, which is the premier open wheel in North America series. Then you've got Formula One.
Open wheel is a literal statement because it's not fendered or anything. Is that?
You nailed it. There's a front wing and a rear wing.
I'm learning.
And then open wheels. So you've got IndyCar and you've got Formula One. Formula One is the European premier open wheel series. You've got Super Formula in Japan, which is their premier kind of Asian series. And then we go right into, everybody knows what NASCAR is for the most part, which is only kind of in the US. That's their specific, and they race in circles only for the most part. They're starting to get into road courses, but they stay to the circles, which IndyCar, by the way, races on ovals, they race on street courses, and they race on road courses. So they do it all. But then you've got sports cars, which is a whole other thing that a lot of people don't know about. But if you've ever heard of, the movie called Ford versus Ferrari, or Le Mans 24 Hours, or Daytona 24 Hours, you've got it's a pretty interesting. So you've got these teams that they race one car for 24 hours straight.
Oh
And
God,
they
dude.
switch the drivers. Yeah, they switch out drivers.
How many drivers? Like, I mean, how long to your body just like you need to swap out? What can you get out of yourself? Like 4 hours, 5 hours?
So quadruple stint. So there's one stint is when we call a stint, it's the tank of fuel in the car, which is about an hour is what a race car holds for fuel. So when you talk about one stint or a double stint's 2 hours, triple stint's 3 hours, and a quad stint is the most famous. It's the decadent quad stint, which is, if you're in that category, you are, you've done it all in sports car. You've stayed in a car for 4.5 plus hours straight.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
Flat out, which is, not many guys could do that. I mean, I consider myself a pretty fit guy, and a double or triple stint in a car, and I am smoked. Like, really? You're crawling out of the car.
Wow.
Yes.
That's rad, dude. While we're talking about this, I'm gonna grab some photos, because a lot of people, we've been talking about the cars, but I'm not really showing people what they look like, and they're beautiful, man. So I'm going through some. By the way, I see your girl. Is that your girl?
Uh-oh. That was we're not together anymore. She's an awesome gal.
My bad.
Rachel. No problem. That's in the tag.
But I'm just flowing through, like, look at this thing. What sort of car is that?
So that was a big throwback.
But I'm actually looking at the wrong one. I'm looking at your personal page. My bad.
No problem. Don't even worry about it. That's got a kind of a mix of everything. That's perfect.
But here we go. Like, look at this thing.
So that's the current car I'm racing, which is a Porsche Carrera Cup car.
Dude, that looks juicy as hell.
Yeah, no, that's a nice car. So
give us some stats.
Horsepower.
Yeah, there we go.
500 horsepower. It's so for those of you who know what a boxer engine is, inline or a flat six. So it's 6 cylinders. They're flat and they hang right on the back of that car. So all the weight is literally at the back of the car, right
over, just giving you grip nonstop.
So,
and then see, that's what fascinates me about you is. But there's also this.
So that's kind of one of my, I guess, traits is drive everything, right? Don't leave anything behind. So
here's my thing, Parker. Each of these amazing pieces of engineering are very different in reaction. So when I guess what I'm trying to say is all that kart experience, right? Would you say, I'm trying to understand, would you say it gives you the basics of understanding racing, how to control under speed, dropping down, what sort of speed you need to drop down to for the turns, and then you add that sort of experience onto these other cars, which is applicable to either the Porsche that we were looking at or the other, right? But they both must react very differently. Like, you must have to change your brain a little bit when you're jumping in this other car.
You definitely do. Every car's got its own way of going fast. I think the easiest way to understand racing, though, is it's time and speed over distance. So that you're breaking down the 3 variables to go fast, which is the time it takes you to get around the track, the distance at which you travel, and then.
Oh, we lost you. We had a lag spike.
That takes
sorry, Parker. We had a little bit of a lag spike there. Can you explain those 3 again? No, it's okay.
No problem.
Time and speed.
So if you want to go, let's say you want to use a different line through a corner, but it takes more distance. You have to account with a higher speed.
Okay.
So it's understanding this, let's call it this theory that whatever line you choose or however you drive the car, it's those 3 variables that are going to make up the lap time, which is how fast you're going to go. And once you start to understand those 3 variables as a feeling, not as like me explaining it to you, but I've been doing this now for so long that it's almost second nature, where you get in a car and you know the feeling at which the car's handling, you know what the car's capable of, and then you also know what line to choose because of how that car's handling to get you the best speed over the distance.
And of course, there's that variable that, what's the limit? How far can I push that until I'm going to slide out? And you know what I mean?
For sure.
Well, that's interesting too, because that lifetime of experience that you're now bringing. I mean, in Italy, are kids racing that young, or were you just very lucky to get into it that young, or is that sort of a universal thing?
So no, I was late. 8 years old
Oh,
was late to
Jesus,
start.
really?
Yes. They started
What?
like in the US. They started 4 or 5, even 3. Like
Wow, that's
yeah.
amazing.
And in Europe, they have what's called kid carts, which is the same thing. They start at 4 or 5. So yeah, no, 8 years old, I was like well behind. I had some catching up to do the first year that I
Yeah.
started.
When you meet other racers in the sport, and maybe you're meeting them for the first time, and you explain where you come from and how you come up, do they just look at you like, who the hell? How Because how many Canadian racers do we really have that are of a caliber of a renown? So maybe Jacques Villeneuve, or like who isn't Jacques Villeneuve? Yeah.
Yep, Jock, and then Jill.
Who else
So
would we
Jill
have?
So one of the notable ones
Really?
from the West Coast, you talk about, you're 100% right. Nobody really notable has come from Alberta, but BC, Greg Moore came from Vancouver, and he was, unfortunately, he passed young driving, but he was signed to Penske, which is
Mm-hmm.
IndyCar's biggest team, Roger Penske, and he was touted as the next, not just next best Canadian, but like next best in IndyCar. He was going to be
really?
fantastic. Yes, he was very good. Very good.
But you would know that because, of course, in Europe and stuff, they would be watching this sort of thing. They would see the new up and comers, and just like us, when we see a Connor Bedard who's scoring 5 points in an under-18 hockey tournament, like recently, like you would note that because they're so immersed in the racing community, right? So
exactly.
it must be just a whole different world in Italy compared to here. And I say Italy a lot because it's the only one that I know that you've mentioned, but you also mentioned Germany, where the one that surprised me too, was it China or Japan?
Japan. Huge,
it's a big race community. Yeah.
Huge. There's more racetracks per capita in Japan than anywhere else in the world.
That's awesome, man. So you've got the opportunity to travel the world doing this really cool thing. And by the way, we have to mention your most recent win. Tell us about that.
Sure. So
yeah.
Awesome. I bounced around quite a bit the last 3 years of my motorsport career. So in 2019, I drove mostly open wheel, but I did dabble in sports cars. And then 2020, it was just open wheel while we were under that pandemic. And then this year, it actually came that I was just going to race sports cars. So I've signed up to race Porsche Carrera Cup, which is the exact car that you showed. There's the podium from COTA, which is awesome. So our first race was in Sebring, Florida, which is a very famous track. I finished 4th and 5th. It was good to kind of knock the rust off. A lot of people don't understand driving. We've already touched on it. It's so different driving a sports car from an open wheel car. I mean,
right.
Just for starters, an open wheel car, you're in the middle of the car when you steer the wheel. Sports car, you're on the left side. So a lot of people don't realize how different the visual is even. So pretty cool to come back with JDX Racing. I've had a good history with them. They're the team actually that in 2019, I got my first sports car win with, and they re-signed me again this year with Jeremy Dale. He was in that photo hugging me after we won the race. So he put a big commitment behind me, which is awesome, to repay him with a win in our second race of the year, which is at COTA. So COTA, Circuit of the Americas in Austin, Texas. They actually race the Formula One, the U.S.
And you started P5, like you weren't up front right away. I mean, how hard is it to claim those spots through a track? Like, these are all professional drivers too. It's not Mario Kart where somebody hits a banana peel and you can get behind them. Like getting in front of somebody, like there must be some real strategy and tactic on how that works. Cause you also have to break, I assume, your regular line in order to maneuver around somebody.
Yes.
So do you just catch them on a mistake or how does that work?
It's a high-speed game of chess, right? You're making him try and push into a mistake. And there's a lot of ways you can do that. There's a lot of tricks to the trade. I don't want to bore anybody with it, but specifically for that race, it actually started out, we were on slick tires, but the track was wet. So what I mean by slick tires, we actually have rain tires as well if it rains. So we race in the rain. We don't stop. It's not like NASCAR. But this particular race, we knew that it was going to dry out. It had rained the night before, but the track was still wet in the morning. So when we went out, like most of the track was wet. We were 30 seconds off our lap time. That's how slow the track was.
Wow. That is a lot.
A lap. Yes. So already you were taking creative lines to find grip and do different things, build heat in the tire. So I was just catching people out on mistakes. Those are conditions that I'm generally pretty good at for whatever reason. I don't even know why I excel when the track is, I'm very good in the wet. So in the rain, I just have a natural ability. Yeah. I don't know why you.
And I'm going to rename this episode Parker Thompson in quotes. I'm very good in the wet.
Yeah, that's what it's. So
I'm sorry, dude.
No, that's funny too.
Carry on.
No, it's good. That is funny.
Yeah.
So,
but you're right that, like, you know, you touched on it, the conditions.
Yeah.
I mean, is there a squad that goes out and like scouts out what you're going to look at? Like, what is there a humidity that you're taking into account and all these sorts of things? Because where the rubber meets the road is literally a giant key to your success. Yeah.
It's the most important part. So to your point, our engineer on the team, which is the guy doing the setup for the car, he's measuring air density, he's measuring temperature, and he's measuring track temperature. So, wow. Yeah, because that, believe it or not, the air temperature, the reason why he measures that is it's important to get our aero balance correct. And when it's thicker air, the car, it's called the center of pressure, which is when the car goes through the air, depending on how thick the air is, it either pushes the front or the rear down more, depending on how thick the air is.
I love this. We're getting educated. Yeah. Okay.
So, depending on if it's hot out, right? Hot air rises, it makes the air less dense. Cold air's thick, right? If you're a golfer, you know that you can drive a ball farther in Alberta than you can at sea level because Alberta, the air's thinner, travels farther. So you can get really, I mean, we could spend hours talking about how the engineer gets pretty into the thick of things on how they engineer the car. Drivers, I would say I'm a more involved driver. I love that stuff because it, unfortunately, I'm not one of those guys that just gets in the car and goes and drives. I have to kind of know myself what's going on around me to understand it, to then be comfortable to drive fast.
I love how you say unfortunately, because I imagine some engineers are like, dude, just chill out. I got this. Meanwhile, you're asking all these questions.
Trust me. And I would just love to just show up and get in the car and go fast, but that's just unfortunately not me. I gotta be there at the crack of dawn to know exactly what's going on. So the engineer, to your point, the engineer is essentially doing all that work for me. So when you say, like, do you have somebody site the track for you? He's went and probably taken a look in the morning and saw that it's wet. He knows the track temperature, so he's setting the tire pressures. That's another thing that people don't know. The tires grow, like, on average, about 8 to 12 PSI. So think about it, right? Yeah, like, you start the tire out at 20 PSI per tire. Yeah. And by 3 laps into the race, it's grown 10 PSI. So it's at 30 when it's hot because air rises. It expands. Yeah, I got you. So that's all the engineer's department. Now, the engineer doesn't really tell me how to drive the car. Like, he doesn't say, hey, you know, turn 9's wet, you should do this or do that. That's all on me. And you gets thrown, and that's what you're using that sight lap for. While you're in the race car, like, you're scrubbing, you're getting your tire temperature, you're getting the car ready, you're getting ready before you go to the race, and you're taking a look at the track so that when you do that first green flag lap, you know where to go and what you think is going to be best on that first lap.
When you leave the gates, it's got to be pretty interesting. Like, you know, I watched a video that you had put out the other day, and it was fantastically done. I don't know who did this, but it kind of shows it kind of shows exactly, you know, the energy that you're feeling before the race. And by the way, this is a beautifully shot vid. So there you are, you're stretching it out. I mean, you're getting amped up and jacked. Like, that electricity in your body must be just amazing. Like, are you like an athlete where you're hitting up pre-workout and all this sort of thing, or Like,
So I'm not taking any C4, but I do definitely take a lot of electrolytes and supplements on a race weekend that are all legal. So there's a lot of stuff that's illegal. We get drug tested almost every race. A lot of stuff.
Wait, are you telling me people are juicing for racing?
Yes.
That's
definitely.
a thing? How is that a thing?
A huge thing. Yeah, well, think about it. If you have to do a quadruple stint, which our races are an hour long, so you probably don't need to juice to get through an hour of being in the car.
Yeah, okay.
But, I literally just got back from New York. We were in Watkins Glen after COTA. We went and tested at a track in New York. And I was in the car for a total of 8.5 hours. I got out once for lunch for one 30-minute stint. And I sat in the car, strapped in the entire day. They didn't let me get out. So, people think, oh, you're a race car driver. It's all sunshine and rainbows, but it is work. Like, you can make work out anything.
Man, listen, I got to level with you. Are you running a catheter or something? Like, what if you got to hit the can and you're in this car, you're in the heat of a race. Are you just going? Like, level with me. You're just going, aren't you?
No. So, okay. Yes. They recommend for you to go. I can 100% confirm that I have never done it. I can't make myself go.
Don't lie to me, man.
No, I'm serious. I can't go that low. But I know plenty of people that have, and you can generally, this sounds disgusting, but your seat's custom molded to your body. So every race seat is custom molded.
So it's like my easy chair that I've been sitting in for 6 years, and now it just fits my rump just right. It's like your chair is molded for your butt.
But not the sad part, but the disgusting part is you can tell what drivers have went to the bathroom in their seat because
it's got to happen, man.
Well, and it reeks. Like, it just stinks.
Obviously.
And the mechanics hate it because we don't drive our car to pre-grid. So pre-grid is where the cars all go before, the fans can do a walk around the car, et cetera, down on the front straightaway. So you drive it from your garage to the pre-grid. Drivers don't usually do that. You can if you're late on time, but most of the drivers walk down to the car, put their helmet on, and go. Well, your mechanic has to sit in your seat. So my mechanic's name is Kevin this year, and I could never do that to Kevin nor anybody else. I'd really have to hate a person to be like, hey, I'm going to piss in my seat, and you're going to have to.
But you're a young man. I mean, maybe as a seasoned racer, 20 years down the road, the body's different. You know what I'm saying?
I agree. So
that cracks me up. But it's cute. But a lot of people might have that question. Like, if you're doing the exertion of the G-force on your internal organs sloshing around in your bone and skin bags, like it's just gotta feel. It's got to be exhausting for one, but for two, it's that pressure is a very real thing. Like, how many G's are you pushing in a really tight turn on a high-end machine? Like 4, 3?
Well, in the IndyCar, you're pushing above 5.
Holy crap.
Yes.
Like, we're getting in fighter jets now.
Oh, for sure. No, and that's exactly what it is. It's literally, a lot of people don't understand this. The same way the fighter jet goes into the air, we stay on the ground.
Right.
Like, if you ran an IndyCar at 200 miles an hour upside down, it would easily stick to the top of, just like Hot Wheels, right? When you, as a kid, it would easily stick to the top of whatever it was sucked to or driving on. So there's a lot of G-forces. Now, the sports cars are a little different. You're not hitting that number, but where the sports car gets super physical is the heat, right? So in the IndyCar, now this is getting complicated, but for those of you who might have known, open cockpit, nothing. Their helmet was fully exposed in the air, right? As you're driving the car, your helmet is above. Yes. They've made some changes the last 2 years, and they've brought in what's called the aero screen. It literally looks like a fighter pilot. It's probably not on my page.
I'm just looking like these
things.
No
problem.
They just look like, I'm just going through some photos while you're talking.
They're
because
pretty neat. I know.
These things are awesome.
You're going to distract me too. So IndyCar has an aero screen, but you're still getting really good airflow into the cockpit, where if you go back to that sports car, you can see that the engine is then inside the body, which you race in, right?
Right.
In the cockpit, you've got the engine, the gearbox, everything's heat soaking inside the cockpit that you're sitting in. So when it's 100 degrees in Florida, Fahrenheit, it's, I don't know even the exact temperature, but I just know that it's pass out hot. Like, it's
Well, how are you taking in fluids while you're racing? Or are you not? They
So
got
they
a
have a
camel
drink.
pack on you?
They have a drink bottle, which is like a camel pack, which you press a button and it pumps water into your helmet. And then they have what's called a cool suit. And your
Okay.
cool suit it's basically a shirt. I wish I had it here. It's on the race truck, but it's a shirt with veins in it. And it pumps. We have it's like a Yeti cooler inside the car that has not only your drink bottle drink, but it also has your cool suit fluids. And
That's
it
awesome.
pumps fluids into your cool suit so that you can stay cool, which helps out a lot.
Listen, man, at the Zed, it seems like they can't seem to get the heat right. You know, like sometimes on a hot day, the heat will be pumping out. And we don't know why. I don't know. But like, I need one of these suits because I'm a fat man now, Parker. And just walking around doing groceries with Jen. I'm telling you, man, if you can give me a cool suit, that's what I'm talking about. I need some
All
of
right.
that.
We'll hook it up. We'll figure something out.
Well, I mean, but it really is like the science behind what you're doing is every little detail at this point in history of racing has been thought out. You know what I mean? So trying to get a leg up, would you agree that for the most part, the cars are fairly even down the line? And it's levied on human experience and human performance because the machines themselves are all so probably comparable.
Yeah.
Or is that BS?
It is and it isn't, right? The advancements that they're making in racing is still unbelievable, especially now with electrification and a lot of the other stuff with, the hybrid systems that they're running in Formula One and in IndyCar. So it's tough. Generally speaking, so I race in a series. This is what I can speak on. Is I race in a series called Porsche Carrera Cup, which is I'm racing against all other Porsches. It's the same car, right? It's called spec racing. So
Okay.
spec racing is 100% man and machine together against each other, right? You get into other series where you've got multiple manufacturers competing against one another, and I can 100% say that there is a car to be in that if you were in that car, you'd probably win the race. Right? Like
Really?
if you look at Formula One, right? You've got,
Okay.
Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. They're winning, they've won 90% of the races for the last 5 years. So
Wow.
yeah.
So like it's once you get a technological
advantage.
But I thought there were so many spec rules that I don't know if the spec rules are there to level the playing field or to make sure somebody doesn't like cheat some way or other. I don't even know how you could, but
they're honestly, they're for the most part there to keep the budget down, which is
it always comes
racing,
back to
right?
the dollar, man.
It does. Like anything. Racing is like a drug for a lot of people, not just race car drivers, but team owners, sponsors, and the thrill of winning. You will spend whatever you got to go faster,
right.
And that's what teams will do. And you've got Formula One; their budgets are, we're talking 500 million pounds a year.
Amazing
for 2 cars.
Dude, how can people watch your races? Like how, are these things streamed? Because here in Canada, obviously it's not going to take up a lot of space on your channel.
Well, luckily, we have come out this year. Well, actually last year, but this year we've refined it. Head to www.parkerthompsonracing.com/live on race weekends. And not only you can actually do it right now, it'll be Coda's schedule, but it gives you the full schedule on the page, and we stream it directly from my website. So there's no confusion as to where you need to go or what you need to do on my website and tune into all my races this year.
I'm going to check it out right now. So yeah, no, this is very easy to find.
Yep.
And then events, right? You said?
You'll go live. It should actually be in the top right corner. And if it's not, just put in the
I got it.
the URL
it's live,
bar.
Baby.
Yeah.
This is a cool site, dude. Like you're a big deal, man. Look at this. Look at this site, dude. It's got oh man, the slow-mo marching across the garage as Parker Thompson chooses his weapon of speed to destroy the competition. If you click on the top right button, you'll find Parker Thompson Racing Live. Yeah, I got to do some voicing spots for you.
I would love that. Yeah, you do.
But tell me a little bit before we go today, and I really appreciate this because I can talk forever about this, man. It's fascinating to me. But tell us, you've gotten on, you mentioned it earlier, you got on the other side of the mic and you're kind of doing more of a televised thing. Tell me about, what is it, a new show? It's a show,
Yeah.
right?
So
Okay.
yeah, kind of funny how it goes. Most of my career has been built on the marketing that I've been able to do for sponsors and for everything. And so I raced on what's called the Road to Indy, which is the Road to Indy is developed for drivers headed to IndyCar. So it's like the WHL and the AHL combined. It's your road to IndyCar, right? If there was a road to NHL, it would be the same thing. It's just the Road to Indy happens to own all three series leading up to IndyCar.
Very cool.
Raced on that for the last 5 years. So I've gotten to know those folks very well, the series owners, the series sponsors, everything. And when they came to found this year that I wasn't going to be returning on the Road to Indy as a driver, and they found out that I got contracted by Porsche Canada and I was becoming a Porsche junior driver this year, they said, we can't let you go. We got to find some way to keep you involved. And it just so happened that the host of what's called the Road to Indy TV was up for grabs, and they put my name in the hat, and they ended up giving me the job as the host of the Road to Indy TV. So now I'm
cool
on color commentary, doing live TV on those race weekends for IndyCar.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Good for you. See? But you've always been a well-spoken guy. You've always been, even when you were a kid and you were talking about some of the initiatives you were working on, you've always been very well-spoken, and you don't sound like a complete moron like Locke or myself. You actually sound like you know what you're talking about. And that experience in the actual circuit itself obviously is going to be very valuable. But you got a little bit of humor, a little bit of wit too. It's not going to be one of those real dry analytical sort of shows. So
No,
I love
fun.
that you're doing that, man. And you know what? Later on down the road, when maybe you put the steering wheel away, maybe that might be a thing for you to continue to be engaged, right? That's a long ways down the line. Long ways.
Yeah. But you know what? It's always been a passion and a love of mine anyway. I mean, that's the first thing we opened the show up with, is the fact that I had fallen in love with the broadcasting side and not only telling my story, but just telling a story. How can you get that story across the best? And then the live TV has taken it one step further, because I've always been really good at, hey, if you need another take, no big deal, right? You've got as many shots as you want to get this out. But live TV, when that camera's on,
yeah,
it's live. You got to fill space, and it's cool for a lot of people that don't know. I've nerded out because I've been so enthralled with racing for the last 10 years that you begin, a lot of the things that I don't think are very interesting anymore are super interesting to other people that don't know racing. But when you've been in it for a long time, it takes a lot to not intrigue me, but it takes a lot for me to learn something. Where
maybe surprise you at this point. Yeah,
exactly. Where broadcasting, it was like, my first weekend, seeing finished products now, like the Anchorman, right? Which is kind of funny. I use that as an example of it is very much like that, so I don't have a teleprompter, but I've got a cue, and when I wear my headset, I've got two people talking to me at all times. I got my producer in my right ear, and then our commercials time guy in the left ear. And, they're never telling me what to say, but they're giving me different ways I can take the conversation. They're telling you, you've got, 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, and you've got to, you have to wrap it up on the fly. So you've got to be so careful of the questions you're asking, right? If you're talking to a guy that's long-winded and you've only got a minute left, you don't want to just say, you don't want to down in a minute. So it's a new art form. It's been a lot of fun.
Oh, drive me nuts, man. I'd be like, stop telling me what to do, man. This is my show. Okay, apparently we got to go. I'd be the guy, literally. All right, that sounds fascinating. Apparently we got to go to commercial, and we'll hit this up when we get back. You're probably much better at that than I am at this, and I'm so proud of you, dude. You've come so far, and it's just been fascinating to watch you, just even on social media, how far you've gone, Parker. I'm really proud of you, buddy. You're a good kid. You've always been that way, and I'm excited to see what happens for you in the future. I wish you the best when it comes to the track. And I'm excited to see what you do broadcasting too, because I'm going to pick you apart, son. I'm going to send you a couple of.
Do it.
But Parker, before we go, I always would love to give you an opportunity to thank some people that might have dragged you along the way, or maybe to talk about some of the initiatives that you want to let people know out there. So the floor is yours, buddy.
Oh, awesome. Well, I'll keep it short and sweet. The biggest partners this year that have helped me get behind the wheel of a race car, obviously Porsche Canada. So if you're looking for a new car and you happen to want to buy a Porsche, let me know. I can sort out something for you back in Canada. Then Buyers Porsche here in the US out of Ohio. A lot of people don't know this. I'm sponsored by 3 different sponsors unrelated to each other, all out of Ohio. So I've got Buyers Porsche, which is out of Columbus. I've got Sergere, which is out of Akron, Ohio. Sergere is a supply chain company. And then I've got Rainier Construction out of Columbus, Ohio, which is a construction company. So kind of cool. Canadian kids getting sponsored by 3 companies out of Ohio, which is kind of random, but it's awesome. They've been
prairie folk, man. That's what it is. It's prairie.
They feel it. And then JDX Racing. I wouldn't be around this year if it wasn't for Jeremy Dale and all the fine folks at JDX Racing out of Colorado. So my helmet, I wish I had it here. It's actually on the race truck, but it's I've got the Rocky Mountains.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and the Three Sisters Peak actually is on the helmet, which is cool on the back of it. So.
Well, that's one of the things I love about the most, Parker, is you never forgot where you come from, right? And even just doing this interview, I really appreciate it, buddy. And I just, it's so fascinating to watch how far you've come. And I can't wait to hit this back again in a couple of years or whenever you want to do one, you let me know, because I think there's a lot of room out there for you to conquer. And a lot of room out there for all of us to cheer you on to in foreign markets or wherever the hell, right? So, well, congratulations, buddy. You did a good job.
Thank you so much, Tony. That means a lot. And you always know that anytime you reach out for an interview, you've got it tomorrow. As long as people still want to hear me talk, I will. I'll make sure that I keep talking.
Well, we do. I do. And one of these days, I got to get to a race. You stay right there, Parker Thompson. I really appreciate it, man. The guy's a phenom. You got to go check out his website. There's also merch available. Don't forget that too. Grab your racing gear. They got shirts and all sorts of stuff. I'm looking at getting some myself. And of course, I showed you where you can watch the races live. Parker Thompson Racing. Go look at it. Check out a race or two. And for you kids out there, or for fathers that have young ones, there it is. You now know that racing is a possibility. It's a tough road to hoe, but it can be done. So thanks so much to Parker. Thank you for tuning in. And as always, on the Distillery, I appreciate you tuning in, but do me a solid, like and subscribe. It really changes the game for us here behind PodX and Xmarks TV. I've got literally a prime rib on the smoker I've got to pull off. So until the next great adventure, folks.
Next time on the Distillery.
Hey, friends, we're looking for our next guests on the Distillery. Do you know somebody that would be great for a show, or do you have a great show idea? Email us at xmarkstv@gmail.com. And who knows, maybe your show idea will be the next episode.